was literally like, like, like gasping for breath. Like,
Welcome to Diary of a Kidney Warrior. Follow my journey as I overcome kidney disease, sharing faith, knowledge, hope, and love.
hi, kidney warriors and friends. Welcome to the channel. If you're new, please do subscribe and don't forget to click the notification bell to be notified when I upload a new video. Now, I want to say a massive thank you to all of my subscribers, all of my supporters that have been with me from day one of Diary of a Kidney Warrior, and also my subscribers and followers on Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast. Now, please do check out the podcast. Please do subscribe. Do comment, let me know what you think, please. It makes a massive difference to the algorithm, supporting kidney health, bringing awareness to kidney disease. So please do check out the podcast and please do tell a friend. Now, it's been a long time since I've recorded a vlog because so much has happened since my last vlog. I was sharing about my peritoneal dialysis journey, having the catheter fitted, my first flush, setting up the peritoneal dialysis machine. So I was sharing content about what was happening at that time, but so much has happened since, and it's taken me a while to actually be ready to actually talk about this in another vlog. And before I say anything else, I want to start with a disclaimer to say that this episode is not to discourage anyone from choosing peritoneal dialysis as their modality for dialysis. If peritoneal dialysis worked for me, I would still be a peritoneal dialysis patient, but I just want to share what's happened in terms of my journey. So I started peritoneal dialysis in August of 2023. I did a week's worth of training and then I started my first peritoneal dialysis session on a Friday. Now, I personally would not recommend anyone do this. I would recommend that when you start your first session of peritoneal dialysis, you do so on a day where you still have access to your renal team for additional support if needed. Now, because I started on a Friday night, the peritoneal dialysis team don't work over the weekend, and so it's only the emergency team that are available. They're not trained specifically in peritoneal dialysis and they don't know you specifically as a patient, so they can't give you personalized advice and what to do or to be able to do anything about your machine. So personally, start when your team are available to give you that support. So I started the Friday night, and my first session was excruciatingly painful. It was like the machine was trying to suck my soul out of my body. It was really, really painful each time it got to the drain section of the peritoneal dialysis process. I managed to get through that first session. It was very, very painful, and I felt so traumatized by the first session that I didn't want to connect for the second session the Saturday night, and I delayed it until I went to bed really late. It was something like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning because I didn't want to connect to the machine again, but I did so, and again, excruciatingly painful, and it was just so painful. It was just awful. On the Monday, I contacted the peritoneal dialysis team and I discussed with them what had happened, how painful it was, and they were able to change the settings on the machine remotely so that there was a tidal, and with the tidal, it left a larger amount of fluid in my peritoneum at the end of the session, and this just seemed to make the difference of having that tidal. So the tidal will just leave a bit more, and when I say the end of the session, I mean at the end of each cycle. So when it got to the drain, it didn't take out as much, so that seemed to make a difference. And so the pain was almost completely gone straight away, and then over a few sessions it wasn't painful anymore. And I was like, great. But then I then had an issue with the machine alarming again and again and again through the night. So the machine was alarming like 10, 11, 12, 13 times through the night. And this continued for weeks. And when I say weeks, I mean 6, 7, 8 weeks, something like that, of continuous alarming. I mean, it was so long. I'm trying to remember exactly how many now, but it was a long period of time. And again, I worked with my team, my consultant, my team, trying to figure out how this issue could be alleviated. And it was like increasing um, the laxatives, because um, if there's any constipation, this will affect um, it will affect the process of peritoneal dialysis. So it was kind of working through that, and making changes to my diet, lots of different ways to try and work through. And when this finally seemed to settle down, and the machine was either not going off at all or maybe once through the night, we got to around coming up to Christmas. We then was doing a test. It's called a PET test, to see how effective the peritoneal dialysis was working. But unfortunately, due to an admin error, the test wasn't done. So the test was then booked to happen over the Christmas period. We got to the Christmas period now, Christmas Day, and I was feeling quite unwell. I got through the day, managed to like get through the day, spend time with my family, but I just didn't feel quite right. The next day, Boxing Day, still didn't feel well, and because it was a bank holiday, my GP was shut, the unit was shut, so it was like, what do I do? And then I was like, should I go to A&E? And then I'm thinking, Boxing Day, bank holiday, being stuck in A&E, don't really want to do that. So tomorrow, when the peritoneal dialysis unit opens up, I'll contact them and see what's going on. So the next day, the Wednesday, contacted the team, and I was told that it wasn't a renal issue. I needed to go to my GP. So I went to my GP. She listened to my chest, my lungs, and she said she could hear something, but she didn't know if it was an infection. So what she did was she gave me antibiotics to cover me, just in case it was an infection. That night, I felt progressively worse. I noticed that when I bent forward, I found it really hard to breathe, and I was really struggling. When I went to sleep, I couldn't lie down. I had to try to sleep upright. And I was just like, what? The next day was the PET test. So I was like, let me just get through this night, so when I go to the hospital, I can be for the PET test, then they can check me out. The next day, which is now the Thursday, I drove to my appointment, and the walk from the car park to the unit where my appointment was a very difficult one. I was walking, I was out of breath, I was really struggling, and I was just pressing through, and I got to the lift, and the lift was broken, and I was like, oh my gosh. So I had to go up the stairs. By the time I got to the top of the stairs, it felt like the room, the corridor was spinning. I felt lightheaded. I was struggling to breathe. And as I'm now at the top of the stairs, like walking forward, I'm now starting to gasp for breath. I managed to get to the door of the clinic, and the nurse and the HCA that were waiting for me to arrive, they like smiled. But when I got to the door, I was literally like 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 gasping for breath. Like I could like barely barely breathe. They were panicking. They thought that I was having a heart attack. They just didn't know what was going on. They were really concerned and called the doctor straight away. The doctor listened to my lungs, and straight away he said, "That sounds terrible." Like, he didn't mince his words at all. He said, "I'm gonna send you for a chest X-ray." They were like, "You can't walk over there, so we're gonna call a porter to take you over there in a wheelchair." So I went over to get the chest X-ray, taken by the porter, and literally as I sat back in the chair, the radiographer said to me, he was like, make sure you speak to your doctor before you go home. And I was like, wow. I was like, you must have seen something. And obviously he can't tell me anything. But the fact that he said something so quickly, I was like, well, something has to be wrong. So I was taken to the waiting area for the porter to collect me, to take me back over to the PD unit. And whilst I was sat there, because I sat there for quite a while waiting for a porter, the same radiographer then came out, and he saw me, and he was like, make sure you speak to the doctor before you go home. And I was like, wow, for him to come back and say something, he must have seen something really bad. So I was really concerned. And then by the time the porter came, collected me, and brought me back to the PD unit, the HCA was waiting for me, and she straight away said, "We have to admit you." Now, the last time I heard those words was at the beginning of my kidney warrior journey, and I was in hospital for 8.5 weeks. So hearing those words, I was in tears. So straight away, and I sounded like a toddler having a tantrum because I was crying out loud and I was struggling to breathe. So it was like, I don't do. I was literally like that. That's how bad my breathing was at that point. And I was just distraught at the thought of having to be an inpatient, because how long would I be in the hospital again? So I was taken to the ward, and and basically they listened to my chest. They could hear something, and they weren't sure what was the cause of the problem. So they decided that they would stop my peritoneal dialysis, because they said, we don't know if it's the peritoneal dialysis fluid that's leaked onto your lungs or not. We don't know what it is, so we have to stop the peritoneal dialysis just in case it is. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and basically, to edit the story down, they drew over 700 mils of fluid from my lung. So that was literally what was, could have cost me my life, literally. And it was confirmed that it was, in fact, the peritoneal dialysis fluid that had leaked onto my lungs. So the irony is the very process of dialysis that was supposed to be saving my life put my life in danger. And so I was then faced with the reality that I couldn't be on peritoneal dialysis anymore, and that I would have to switch over to hemodialysis. Now, this in of itself for me was a nightmare situation, because I never wanted to be in the situation of having to switch to hemodialysis at all, but even more so in an emergency situation, because then I knew that they would have to fit a neckline or a chest line. And that was literally my worst nightmare unfolding in front of my eyes. And it was a beginning of a grieving process for me, because a large part of me wanting to do peritoneal dialysis was having the autonomy of dialyzing at home, of being able to choose when I connect to the machine, having that freedom, not having to go into a hospital or a dialysis unit for my dialysis. Being able to do that from day one was the main pull for peritoneal dialysis for me, but also the awareness that hemodialysis would be a more harsher version of dialysis when it came to its impact on my body. I had the chest line fitted, and this was done under local anaesthetic, so I was awake, and they put a sheet over my face and fitted the line through my jugular vein. It was again a traumatic experience. The fear that if I cough or anything happened during that time when it was being fitted, what the consequence of that would be. But fortunately, it was fitted. It felt very, very tight. There was a lot of bruising, so it did look horrific. And I went kind of through the grieving process of losing peritoneal dialysis because it had meant so much to me to be able to do that modality of dialysis, but also the impact that having something inserted into my chest had on me physically as well. So now I have a chest line, and which I do my dialysis through. The first dialysis session was the next day, and I cried literally the whole day. So from I woke up, knew it was going to happen. I cried the whole day. I cried through the session. I cried myself to sleep. And again, it was part of the grieving process of losing peritoneal dialysis and losing my autonomy, losing the ability, like I said, to be able to do dialysis at home. The first few sessions were very, like I said, very emotionally painful, and a big, massive adjustment, having to get used to a new team, a new consultant, everything. Again, it was a grieving process of my dialysis life as it was. But what I immediately became aware of was actually the amount of fluid that was coming off my body. So I think after the first hemodialysis session, I think I was something like 4 pounds lighter. And in the time that I've been doing hemodialysis, they've taken off over 1.5 stone in fluid. So I look back and wonder, actually, the whole time that I was on peritoneal dialysis, whether I was getting any physical benefit from that modality. And because since like the whole time I was on peritoneal dialysis, my legs were always swollen, my ankles swollen. But since being on hemodialysis, I can see my ankles again. Like, I almost forgot what they looked like. And like I said, they've taken off a significant amount of excess fluid off my body, and still taking off excess fluid off my body. So it seems that hemodialysis has worked out better for me as an individual, and I do heavily emphasize that for me as an individual. Unfortunately, peritoneal dialysis did not work for me. It did not work for my body, and hemodialysis, with all its minuses, the plus point is it seems to be working better for me. So I just wanted to quickly share what has happened since I last recorded a vlog, and if you want to know any more about my experience with hemodialysis or any more about what happened with peritoneal dialysis, then please do let me know in the chat or tweet me or DM me on Instagram, Facebook or TikTok if you have any questions that you would like me to answer, or please do comment in the comment section below any questions that you would like me to answer. So yep, this is what's happened so far. So despite everything, I am still fighting on. I'm still determined to, to stay focused, to stay positive, to raise awareness, to educate and empower people. And so, yes, please do continue with me on this journey. Thank you for your time. And until next time, take care and choose to live.